Why was everyone staring at the janitor? The naval amphibious base gym hummed with its usual rhythm. Weights clanking, grunts of effort, the sharp squeak of rubber soles on polished concrete, and in the corner near the wrestling mats a woman swept the floor, methodical, quiet, invisible to most. Her name was Evelyn Harper, and in about 3 minutes her life would change in a way she never wanted it to. The broom moved in steady arcs across the floor, back and forth, a meditation in motion. She traced the edge of the wrestling mats carefully, respectfully, as if the space itself deserved her attention. This was a place of honor, a place where men pushed themselves beyond limits, where warriors were forged. Now it was just another space to be cleaned. But Evelyn cleaned it with the same precision she brought to everything else in her life. She didn't hear him approach at first, or maybe she did. Maybe she just chose not to respond. "Are you deaf, old lady?" I said, "Move it." The voice cut through the gym noise like a blade, sharp, young, dripping with unearned confidence. Evelyn didn't turn around. The broom kept moving. Scrape, scrape, scrape. The bristles whispered against concrete, the only answer she offered. Behind her, the young Navy SEAL stepped closer. His shadow fell over her bent frame. Sweat glistened on his muscular arms. Impatience radiated from him like heat. He was used to being obeyed, used to being the most dangerous person in any room. "Hey, I'm talking to you." Still she swept. "We need this space. Go empty a trash can somewhere else." That's when Evelyn stopped, not because of his words, not because of his tone, but because she had reached the end of her row. The job was done, at least this part of it. She straightened her back slowly, each vertebrae clicking into place, a process that spoke of years and miles. When she turned, her face surprised him, smooth, unlined. She couldn't have been more than 25. Her eyes were pale green, calm as a winter lake. She didn't speak, just held his gaze. And that quiet defiance, that utter lack of intimidation, that was the spark. The SEAL frowned. He ran a towel over the back of his neck, a deliberate motion designed to display the golden trident pin stitched onto his workout shirt, the symbol of the elite, the symbol of warriors. "Let's be clear," he said, leaning in. His tone shifted from annoyance to something colder, professional contempt. "I'm not asking for your schedule. I am an active duty operator, and this mat is needed for immediate mission essential dry runs. The delay you're causing now costs minutes of training, minutes that could cost lives later." He paused, watching her face for reaction. There was none. "Do you understand the chain of command? Or is that too complex a concept for civilian cleaning staff?" Evelyn's pale green eyes tracked the movement of the trident pin, a small polished object that felt impossibly light compared to the weight of his words. She made no move to acknowledge his threat. No nod, no step backward, nothing. "What's your problem?" he snapped, voice rising. "Did you not hear me?" From across the gym, another SEAL toweling off nearby chuckled. The confrontation had an audience now. Others were watching, waiting to see how this would play out. The cocky operator putting the janitor in her place. Entertainment for a Tuesday afternoon. Evelyn's hands rested on the worn wooden handle of the broom. Her grip was loose, comfortable, the kind of grip that comes from years of holding the same tool. The air between them crackled with unspoken challenge. The vast difference between her quiet stillness and his coiled energy created a tension that promised to snap. The young SEAL, whose name was Petty Officer Reed, took another step forward, closing the distance until he was nearly chest to chest with her. The gym seemed to grow quieter, the usual cacophony of training fading as more people took notice. Reed was built like a pillar, muscle and arrogance forged in the most grueling training pipeline in the world. He was used to deference. Evelyn, by contrast, was lean and wiry. Her maintenance uniform hung loosely on her frame. She smelled faintly of cleaning solution and fresh coffee. "Look, Missy," Reed said, his voice dropping to a low, condescending growl. This isn't a daycare. This is a place for warriors. We need the mat, so take your broom and shuffle off. Now." Evelyn's expression didn't change. She simply blinked, a slow, deliberate motion. "The floor needs to be swept," she said finally. Her voice was soft but clear. "Keeps the dust down. Better for breathing when you're exerting yourself." The simple, logical statement seemed to infuriate Reed even more than silence had. It was so civilian, so mundane. He threw his head back and let out a loud, theatrical burst of laughter that echoed off the steel girders of the high ceiling, making sure everyone within earshot heard the performance. "Did you hear that, boys? The janitor's giving us medical advice on air quality control for peak performance." He turned back to his colleague, who was now fully grinning. The humiliation was the point now, not the mat, not the training, the need to remind this woman of her place. Reed stepped back, reaching out as if to pat her head like a pet. "You're just adorable, aren't you? What are you doing? Working here to put yourself through community college, trying to save up for a decent used car." His smile was cruel, practiced. "Listen to me, sweetheart. The moment your lungs are full of water and sand in a combat zone, you don't worry about dust. You worry about surviving. That simple broom is the most lethal piece of equipment you've ever held. Now get your mop and bucket and go back to the supply closet where you belong." Evelyn said nothing, but something flickered in her eyes, not anger, something deeper, something that looked almost like sadness. "You think I care about dust?" Reed scoffed. "I've been in conditions that would make you cry yourself to sleep. Now, for the last time, get out of the way." He punctuated the command by shoving the end of Evelyn's broom. The broom clattered to the floor. The sharp crack of wood hitting concrete rang out like a gunshot, and for the first time something changed in Evelyn's face. Not pain, not fear, but a flicker of profound distress, as if the reckless violence against a simple tool struck her deeper than any insult could. The broom was old, the bristles worn unevenly from years of use, but it was still functional, still useful, a symbol of order maintained, and watching it fall seemed to hurt her in a way Reed couldn't understand. Evelyn's eyes traced the length of the handle on the floor, cataloging the small scuff mark the fall had created. Then she slowly knelt. Her movement was utterly calm, devoid of haste, yet possessed of a terrible, contained focus, as if retrieving the broom was a ritual more important than the hostile giant towering over her. Reed saw her stoop as an act of submission. "That's better," he sneered. "Now you're learning." The surrounding SEALs watched with casual interest. A diversion, a bit of sport at the expense of the hired help. They saw a young woman being put in her place, a reaffirmation of the pecking order, the strong versus the weak, the warrior versus the worker. But someone else saw something different. Across the gym, leaning against a weight rack, was Master Chief Petty Officer Grant, late 40s, a command-level operator who had seen more than his share of combat zones and cocky young SEALs. He rarely intervened in these contests. Friction helped forge teams, after all. But as Evelyn bent to retrieve her broom, Grant's eyes narrowed. The collar of her uniform shifted, pulled taut by the movement. For a fleeting second, the skin on the back of her neck was exposed, just below her hairline. And on that smooth skin was a tattoo. Grant pushed himself off the rack, his own workout forgotten, because he had seen that tattoo before, not in person, but in books, in grainy photographs from a bygone era of warfare, an era that predated the SEAL teams themselves. His stomach twisted with cold shock. He wasn't just looking at ink, he was looking at an impossible artifact. What had he just witnessed? Master Chief Grant moved through the gym like a man in a dream. His feet carried him forward, but his mind was still processing what his eyes had seen. That tattoo, that impossible, unmistakable mark. The Mako unit. A name that existed only in whispers and classified files. A team so far off the books they were considered myth, urban legend in the special operations community. The kind of story old-timers told over drinks when they wanted to mess with the new guys. Except Grant had seen the documentation. Years ago, during a classified briefing at Dam Neck, photographs of three women in diving gear, faces obscured, names redacted, a single mission in the Korean War that had been buried so deep it might as well have never happened. And the tattoo, a coiled serpent around a trident, the mark of the Naval Combat Demolition Units, but with modifications, details that made it unique to one specific operation. Operation Mako. Grant's hands were trembling slightly as he approached. Reed was still standing over Evelyn, basking in his perceived victory. The other SEALs were chuckling, already losing interest. Just another day at the base. Just another reminder of hierarchy. Petty Officer Reed, Grant's voice cut through the noise. Low, controlled, but carrying the weight of command. Reed turned, his smile fading slightly when he saw the Master Chief approaching. Master Chief, just clearing the mat for the team. Step back, Grant said, not a request. Reed's brow furrowed, but he complied. You didn't argue with a Master Chief, not if you valued your career. Grant stopped a respectful distance from Evelyn. She had retrieved her broom and was standing again, her expression unchanged. That same quiet calm, but now Grant saw it differently. This wasn't the calm of someone who had never faced danger. This was the calm of someone who had faced the worst and survived. Ma'am, Grant said carefully, may I ask you a question? Evelyn's pale green eyes met his. She didn't speak, but she nodded slightly. Grant hesitated. How do you ask someone about a classified operation that officially never existed? How do you confirm something that every instinct told him was impossible? That mark on your neck, he said quietly. Where did you serve? The gym seemed to hold its breath. Reed was watching now, confused. The other SEALs had stopped their workouts, sensing something shifting in the atmosphere. Evelyn was silent for a long moment. Her hand unconsciously moved to the back of her neck, fingers brushing the spot where the tattoo lay hidden beneath her collar. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Wonson, February 1951. 2 words, 1 place, 1 date, but to Grant they were confirmation of something extraordinary. Jesus Christ, he breathed, then louder, everyone attention. The command snapped through the gym like electricity. SEALs straightened. Conversations died. Even Reed stood a little taller, though confusion still clouded his face. Grant's jaw was tight. His eyes hadn't left Evelyn's face. Ma'am, with respect, I need to make a phone call. Would you please wait here? Evelyn simply nodded again. Grant pulled out his phone and stepped away, his fingers moving fast across the screen. Reed watched, utterly lost. Master Chief, I don't understand what's... Shut up, Reed, Grant said without looking at him. The words weren't angry. They were matter of fact, as if Reed had become completely irrelevant to the situation. The phone call took 3 minutes. Grant spoke in low, urgent tones. Phrases drifted back to the waiting crowd. Yes, I'm certain. The tattoo matches. Once in harbor. Need confirmation from command immediately. When he returned, his face was pale. His hands were no longer shaking, but something in his eyes had changed. He looked at Evelyn with an expression that mixed awe and regret and profound respect. Commander Brooks is on his way, Grant said. He'll be here in 5 minutes. Who's Commander Brooks? Reed asked, his voice smaller now, less certain. The commanding officer of this entire base, Grant replied. His tone suggested that was the least important detail. He turned back to Evelyn. Ma'am, I apologize for this. I know you prefer to keep it quiet, but after what just happened, he glanced at Reed with barely concealed contempt. After the disrespect you were shown, some things need to be said. Evelyn's expression finally shifted. The calm cracked just slightly, and beneath it Reed caught a glimpse of something that made his blood run cold. Not anger, not indignation, but a deep, bone-weary resignation, as if she had known this moment would come eventually, as if she had been dreading it. "It was a long time ago," she said softly. "Some things don't expire, ma'am," Grant replied. The 5 minutes felt like hours. The gym had gone completely silent. Word had spread somehow. More personnel were filing in, gathering at a respectful distance. Nobody knew exactly what was happening, but they sensed it was important. Reed stood frozen, his earlier bravado evaporating like morning mist. He kept glancing between Evelyn and Grant, trying to piece together what he'd missed. Why was a master chief treating a janitor like visiting royalty? Why was the base commander coming to the gym? What had he done? When Commander Brooks arrived, he didn't arrive alone. The gymnasium doors burst open with a force that made everyone jump. Commander Samuel Brooks strode in, flanked by 2 Marine guards in full dress uniform. His face was a mask of barely controlled emotion. Behind him, 3 more officers followed, their expressions grim. Brooks was in his early 50s, a career officer with silver hair and a bearing that commanded instant respect. He had led men in Afghanistan and Iraq. He had made decisions that saved lives and cost lives. He had earned every ribbon on his chest the hard way. But as his eyes found Evelyn standing quietly with her broom, something in his military composure crumbled. He crossed the gym floor in long, purposeful strides. The gathered seals parted like water, and when he reached Evelyn Harper, this man, this commanding officer of the entire naval amphibious base, snapped his heels together and rendered a sharp, perfect salute. It wasn't a casual gesture. It was the salute one renders to a Medal of Honor recipient, to a visiting dignitary, to a figure of immense and profound importance. The 2 Marine guards, seeing their commander's action, followed suit, white-gloved hands slicing through the air in unison. Reed's face went white. "Ms. Harper," Commander Brooks said, his voice clear and ringing with authority. "I am Commander Brooks. I want to personally and professionally apologize for the disrespect you have been shown in this facility." He held the salute, his eyes locked on Evelyn's. The silence in the gym was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the mat. Evelyn stood very still. Her hand tightened slightly on the broom handle. Then slowly she raised her own hand and returned the salute. The movement was crisp, professional, the salute of someone who had done it 1,000 times before. And in that moment everyone saw it, the transformation. The janitor disappeared, and in her place stood a warrior. Brooks lowered his salute but remained at attention. "For the benefit of those who were unaware," he announced, his voice now booming through the silent gym, "this is Evelyn Harper. Before she was a janitor here, she was a frogman." Confusion rippled through the crowd. A woman, a frogman, that didn't make sense. "She was part of a naval combat demolition unit during the Korean War," Brooks continued. His voice carried the weight of history, of truth too long buried. "She was a member of a specialized 3-woman team under a clandestine program known as Operation Mako." The name meant nothing to most of them, but Grant's face told the story. And slowly, as Brooks continued, understanding began to dawn. Their mission, which is still largely classified, was to swim into Wonsan Harbor, North Korea, ahead of the main invasion force, and disable the submarine nets and mine clusters protecting the harbor. Brooks paused, let the words sink in. They did this with no breathing apparatus, using only knives and handmade explosives, in near-freezing water, under the cover of darkness. The gym was so quiet now that the sound of someone's sharp intake of breath echoed like thunder. She then swam for another 2 hours, evading capture, and was the sole survivor of her unit to return to friendly lines. Sole survivor, the words hung in the air like smoke. For her actions, she was secretly awarded the Navy Cross, an award she never spoke of, a mission that was erased from the books to protect operational security. Brooks's voice grew harder, colder. She is not just a veteran. She is a hero of the highest caliber, and she deserves nothing less than the absolute and unwavering respect of every single person on this base. Could one moment destroy everything you thought you knew about yourself? Reed felt like the floor had disappeared beneath him. The walls were closing in. Every word from Commander Brooks's mouth was a hammer blow. Every revelation stripped away another layer of his confidence until he stood exposed, raw, ashamed. A Navy Cross recipient, a frogman, a survivor of a classified operation that predated the SEAL teams themselves. And he had mocked her, called her sweetheart, told her to go back to her supply closet. He had shoved her broom. Brooks turned his gaze onto Reed now. The commander's eyes were cold as Arctic ice. When he spoke, his voice dropped to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried through the entire gymnasium. "You," he said, each word precise and cutting, "are a disgrace to that uniform." Reed wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor, to wake up and find this was all a nightmare. "You mistake arrogance for strength. You mistake youth for wisdom." Brooks took a step closer. "This woman, this hero you chose to mock and belittle, has more valor in her little finger than you have in your entire body." The words weren't just a rebuke. They were a dismantling, a complete destruction of everything Reed thought he was. "Master Chief Grant," Brooks's voice rose again, "you will personally escort this petty officer to my office. He is on report. He will issue a formal written apology to Ms. Harper." Grant stepped forward, his face grim. "Yes, sir." But Brooks wasn't finished. He took 2 deliberate steps forward, stopping inches from Reed. With a slow, precise motion, he reached out and with a sharp rip, tore the golden trident pin from the breast of Reed's uniform shirt. The sound of thread tearing was obscenely loud in the silence. Brooks held the pin up between his thumb and forefinger, a tiny glittering piece of metal that suddenly seemed to weigh nothing at all. "This trident, petty officer, is a symbol of absolute dedication and respect for those who came before you." His voice dropped below a roar, making it intensely personal. "Until you understand what true courage looks like, you do not have the right to wear it." He turned and dropped the pin directly onto the polished floor at Evelyn's feet, placing the burden of its value on the only person in the room who truly understood sacrifice. It was an unmistakable, humiliating order. Reed had to retrieve the symbol of his identity from the woman he had just insulted, or leave it there forever. Reed's legs trembled, his vision blurred. He had never felt so small. "And starting Monday," Brooks continued, addressing the entire gym now, "every single operator in this command, from the newest recruit to the most seasoned veteran, will attend a mandatory course on naval history, with a specific focus on the contributions of the UDT and the women who built the legacy that you all take for granted." He let that sink in for a moment. Then he turned back to Evelyn and his expression softened. The Iron Commander became something gentler, something almost tender. "Ms. Harper," he said quietly, "from the bottom of my heart I am sorry." Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked past him, her pale green eyes finding Reed, the young SEAL who had called her old lady, who had told her to shuffle off, who had treated her like she was nothing. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but steady, carrying across the silent gym like a prayer. "Son," she said, looking directly at Reed, "respect isn't in the uniform you wear. It's in how you wear it." Reed's throat constricted. He couldn't speak, could barely breathe. "The strongest person isn't the one who can lift the most weight." Evelyn's voice remained gentle, kind, even. "It's the one who can lift others up." She looked down at the simple broom in her hands. "There's no shame in any job, as long as you do it with dignity." The words were simple, plain, but they cut deeper than any reprimand Brooks could have delivered. because they came without anger, without vindication, just truth, patient and unwavering. The tattoo on Evelyn's neck was hidden again beneath her collar, but everyone knew it was there now. That mark, that testament to dignity earned in the crucible of war. She remembered the night she received it, huddled in a makeshift tent somewhere in Japan. The mission briefing had been simple and suicidal. They were to be ghosts. If they were captured, they were disavowed. If they died, their bodies would never be recovered. Before they left, their chief, a hardened man who had fought at Normandy, pulled out a small kit. His hands were steady as he prepared the needle. "The Navy won't give you a medal for this," he said. "They won't even admit you were here, but we will know, we will remember." And he had inked the coiled serpent around the trident onto each of their necks. A permanent, private medal of valor that no enemy could take and no politician could erase. A symbol of their quiet, deadly purpose. Two of those women never came back from Wonsan. Their bodies still lay somewhere in the frozen waters off the North Korean coast. Their names would never appear on any memorial. Their families were told they had died in training accidents. But Evelyn remembered. She carried their memory in that tattoo, in her quiet dignity, in the way she swept floors with the same precision she had once used to disarm minds in the dark. The gym remained frozen. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The weight of history pressed down on them all. Finally, Master Chief Grant cleared his throat. "Petty Officer Reed, come with me." Reed moved like a man underwater, slow, disconnected from his own body. As he passed Evelyn, he wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. What could he possibly say? Grant led him toward the door. The other SEALs watched them go, their expressions a mixture of shock and something else. Perhaps the uncomfortable realization that any of them could have been Reed. Any of them might have made the same mistake. Arrogance is a luxury of ignorance, and they had all been ignorant. Commander Brooks remained standing near Evelyn. He gestured to one of the officers who had accompanied him. "Lieutenant, please escort Ms. Harper to my office when she's ready. I'd like to speak with her privately if she's willing." Evelyn nodded once. Brooks turned to address the assembled personnel one final time. "I want everyone here to understand something. This base exists because people like Ms. Harper did the impossible. They swam into enemy harbors. They cleared beaches. They died in the dark so that others could land in the light. The legacy we inherited isn't just tactical, it's moral, and today we failed to honor that legacy." He let his gaze sweep across every face. "We will do better." Then he left, taking most of his entourage with him. The Marine guards followed, their backs straight, their movements precise. The heavy doors swung closed behind them. And suddenly the gym was just a gym again, except nothing felt the same. People began to disperse slowly, quietly. Nobody felt like working out anymore. The energy had shifted. The air felt heavier, charged with uncomfortable awareness. Evelyn stood alone with her broom. The golden trident pin still lay on the floor at her feet, glinting in the fluorescent light. She looked at it for a long moment. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, she knelt down. But she didn't pick it up. Instead, she gently used the tip of the broom's worn bristles to sweep a single clean line around the pin, separating it from the rest of the dirty floor, creating a small island of cleanliness around this symbol that meant so much to so many. She then leaned the broom against the wall near the mat. Her work here was complete. The message was clear. The disrespect was forgiven. The job was done. And the pin, this symbol of a warrior's calling, was now clean, preserved, waiting for the humble petty officer to earn it back on his own terms. Only then did she step away, leaving the space as she had found it, orderly, dignified, clean. What changes when the whole world learns your secret? The fallout from that day rippled outward like circles on water, swift, decisive, inescapable. Petty Officer Reed was formally reprimanded and assigned to remedial duties for a month. a humiliating but educational experience that involved cleaning the base's facilities alongside the civilian staff. Every morning at 600, he reported to the maintenance supervisor. Every day, he mopped floors, emptied trash, scrubbed toilets, and swept the same mats he once demanded be cleared for his training. The other SEALs watched, some with pity, some with relief that it wasn't them, most with the uncomfortable understanding that Reed had simply said out loud what many of them had thought quietly. The mandatory naval history course was implemented immediately. The first session was taught by a local historian, a retired Navy captain who specialized in Korean War operations. He brought photographs, documents, testimony from surviving UDT members who remembered when women were allowed to serve in combat roles for exactly one classified operation and then erased from history. And then he introduced a surprise guest. Evelyn Harper walked to the front of the training room in her maintenance uniform. She didn't change into anything special, didn't wear her Navy cross, just carried herself with that same quiet dignity that had become her signature. She didn't speak for long, maybe 10 minutes, but what she said carried more weight than hours of lectures. She talked about the cold, how the water in Wonson Harbor was so frigid it felt like knives in your lungs, how you had to control your breathing, your panic, your body's natural urge to gasp and thrash. She talked about her teammates, Sarah and Mackenzie, how Sarah had grown up on a farm in Iowa and could hold her breath for 4 minutes, how Mackenzie had been a competitive swimmer who joined the Navy to prove women belonged in combat, how they had become sisters in a way that went deeper than blood. She talked about the mission, how they swam for 6 hours through enemy waters, how they used handmade explosives because the official ones weren't designed for freezing temperatures, how they worked by touch alone in the absolute darkness of a harbor at 300. And she talked about the moment everything went wrong, when the explosion came early, when Sarah didn't surface, when Mackenzie dove back down to look for her and never came back up. I waited, Evelyn said, her voice steady but soft. 20 minutes, 30, I kept thinking they'd surface, that I'd see them, but the harbor was waking up, lights on the shore, patrol boats. I had to choose between waiting for them and completing the mission. She paused. The training room was absolutely silent. I chose the mission, because that's what we were trained to do, that's what they would have wanted. Another pause. But I think about that choice every single day. No one moved, no one breathed. People think war is about heroism, Evelyn continued, about bravery and glory, but mostly it's about doing the job in front of you and trying to live with the choices you made when everything was falling apart. She looked around the room, at the young faces, the confident operators who thought they understood sacrifice. The tattoo on my neck isn't about pride, she said. It's about remembering, about carrying the weight of the ones who didn't come home. That's the real burden of service, not the danger, not the glory, the memory. When she finished speaking, no one clapped. It would have felt wrong. Instead, they sat in heavy silence, processing what they'd heard, understanding, perhaps for the first time, that the legacy they inherited was built on grief as much as valor. Reed sat in the back row. He hadn't spoken to Evelyn since that day in the gym, hadn't known what to say, but now, listening to her quiet testimony, he felt something crack open inside him, a recognition of his own emptiness, his own shallow understanding of what it meant to serve. The course lasted 6 weeks. Every operator attended. They learned about the naval combat demolition units, the underwater demolition teams, the forgotten operations, the classified missions, the men and women who died in the dark so that history could move forward in the light. And gradually something shifted. The way people looked at Evelyn changed, not with pity, not with condescension, but with recognition. When she walked through the base, SEALs nodded respectfully, said good morning, held doors, small gestures perhaps, but meaningful ones. Evelyn neither encouraged nor discouraged this new attention. She simply continued doing her job, sweeping floors, emptying trash, maintaining the spaces where warriors trained. She did it with the same precision she brought to everything else, because dignity wasn't about recognition. It was about how you carried yourself when no one was watching. 3 weeks after the incident, Reed approached her. It was late afternoon. She was locking up the supply closet at the end of her shift. Her cleaning cart sat nearby, everything precisely organized, tools in their designated spots, supplies accounted for, order maintained. "Miss Harper," Reed said, his voice was barely a whisper. I wanted to apologize in person. What I did, there's no excuse. I was wrong." Evelyn turned, really looked at him, and what she saw was different from the arrogant young operator who had shoved her broom. His shoulders were less tense. His eyes held genuine remorse, the kind that comes not from being punished but from genuine understanding. She was quiet for a moment, then she simply nodded. "We all make mistakes, son," she said. "The question is what you do after." Reed's throat tightened. "I don't know if I can make this right." "You can't," Evelyn replied gently. "But you can be a better man tomorrow than you were today. That's all any of us can do." She reached out and patted his shoulder, a simple gesture, grandmotherly almost, but it carried absolution. "The trident you lost," she continued, "you'll get it back when you earn it. Not from the Navy, from yourself. When you understand that it's not about being the strongest or the fastest or the most dangerous. It's about being someone worth following into the dark." Reed nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Evelyn turned to go, pushing her cleaning cart toward the maintenance building. But then she paused, looked back, not at Reed but at something else, some memory that flickered across her features like a shadow. "You asked me once if I understood the chain of command," she said quietly. "I do. I understand it very well. But I also understand something you're just learning now. True authority doesn't come from rank or position. It comes from sacrifice, from doing what needs to be done even when no one is watching, even when history will never record your name." She smiled then, a small, sad smile. "That's what Sarah and Mackenzie taught me. In the dark, in the cold, when everything went wrong and all we had was each other and the mission. Authority is temporary, duty is forever." She resumed walking, the wheels of her cart squeaking slightly on the concrete. Reed watched her go, this quiet woman who carried the weight of ghosts and glory with equal grace. He stood there for a long time after she disappeared around the corner. Then he returned to his barracks, sat on his bunk, and for the first time since joining the Navy, he cried. Not from shame, not from punishment, but from the profound realization of how little he had understood, how much he still had to learn. The golden trident pin sat in his locker. Commander Brooks had returned it after 2 weeks with instructions that Reed could wear it again when he felt ready. Not when his punishment ended, when he felt ready. Reed hadn't put it back on his uniform yet. Maybe he would tomorrow, maybe next week, maybe when he understood what Evelyn already knew, that symbols only matter when they're earned. That respect flows upward from character, not downward from authority. That sometimes the greatest warriors don't carry weapons at all. They just carry brooms and memories and the unshakable conviction that every job, no matter how humble, deserves to be done with dignity. The base settled back into its routine. Training continued. Missions were planned and executed. The rhythm of military life resumed. But something fundamental had shifted. The story of the janitor with the tattoo spread beyond the amphibious base, to other SEAL teams, to UDT veterans, to the quiet corners of the special operations community where legends were born and carefully preserved. Some people started digging into Operation Mako, trying to find documentation, confirmation, details. Most of what they found was redacted, classified, hidden behind layers of bureaucracy and national security, but enough fragments existed to confirm the truth. 3 women, 1 mission, 2 deaths, 1 survivor. A few journalists reached out, wanting interviews. Evelyn declined them all, politely but firmly. She had already said what needed to be said, to the people who needed to hear it. She didn't need her face on television or her story in newspapers. Some things are meant to stay quiet, she told one persistent reporter. Sarah and Mackenzie can't tell their stories. It wouldn't be right for me to profit from their silence. And that was the end of it. But within the military community, Evelyn Harper became something else. Not a celebrity, not a mascot, but a reminder, a living testament to the fact that heroism doesn't always announce itself, that the most profound acts of courage often happen in the dark, witnessed by no one, recorded by nothing except the scars they leave on the souls of survivors. Young operators started seeking her out, not for autographs or photographs, but for conversations. They asked about fear, about loss, about how to carry the weight of difficult choices, about what it means to serve when the glory is gone and all that's left is the work. Evelyn answered their questions honestly, without pretense, without trying to sound wise or profound. She just told the truth as she understood it, and somehow that was exactly what they needed. She told them that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing your job despite the terror that threatens to consume you. She told them that leadership isn't about giving orders. It's about being willing to go first into the darkness and trusting others to follow. She told them that the hardest part of service isn't the danger. It's coming home afterward and figuring out who you are when the mission is over and the war has moved on without you. She told them that grief doesn't diminish with time. You just get stronger at carrying it. And she told them that dignity, real dignity, is a choice you make every single day, in how you treat others, in how you approach even the smallest task, in whether you choose to lift people up or tear them down. The broom is as important as the rifle, she said once to a group of young SEALs who had sought her out during a break in training. Both are tools, both require skill, both serve a purpose. The difference is the rifle gets the glory and the broom gets ignored. But the base doesn't run without clean floors. Missions don't succeed without the support staff. Warriors don't train without the maintenance crews. Remembering that doesn't make you weak. It makes you wise. One of the SEALs, a young lieutenant, asked her if she regretted her service, if she wished she had done something else with her life, something safer, something that didn't cost her friends and years of silence. Evelyn was quiet for a long time before answering. "Regret is complicated," she finally said. "I regret that Sarah and Mackenzie didn't come home. I regret that their families never knew the truth about how they died. I regret that we were erased from history because the Navy wasn't ready to admit women could do what we did." She paused, her pale green eyes distant. "But I don't regret the mission. I don't regret serving, because someone had to do it. And if not us, then who? Sometimes the world needs people willing to disappear into the dark, to do the impossible, to carry secrets that weigh heavier than metals." She looked at the young lieutenant. "Your generation has it easier in some ways. You're recognized, celebrated. Your families know what you do, but the burden is the same. The choices are the same. And someday you'll have to decide who you are when the glory fades and all that's left is the memory of the people you couldn't save." The lieutenant nodded, absorbing this. Then he asked the question that had been bothering him since he first heard her story. "How do you live with it, knowing you left them behind?" Evelyn's expression softened. "You don't live with it, son. You live for it. You make sure their sacrifice meant something. You honor their memory by becoming someone they would have been proud to serve with. You carry them forward." She touched the back of her neck, where the tattoo lay hidden. "This mark isn't a badge of honor. It's a promise that I won't forget, that their courage will be remembered even if their names never appear in any history book. That's how you live with impossible choices. You make them mean something." The conversation stayed with that young lieutenant, and with the others who heard it, because Evelyn wasn't selling them a fantasy. She wasn't pretending war was noble or sacrifice was glorious. She was simply showing them what it looked like to carry the weight with dignity, to choose honor when recognition is impossible, to keep serving even when no one is watching. That's leadership, not the kind taught in manuals, not the kind that comes with rank, but the kind that emerges from the quiet conviction that duty matters more than glory, that character matters more than credit, that how you treat the weakest person in the room defines you more than how you command the strongest. And slowly, imperceptibly, the culture began to shift. Not dramatically, not overnight, but in small, meaningful ways. Operators started acknowledging the maintenance staff, thanking the janitors, recognizing the civilians who kept the base running, remembering that the mission requires more than just warriors. It requires a whole ecosystem of people doing jobs that rarely get celebrated but are absolutely essential. Reed, for his part, completed his remedial duties with a humility that surprised everyone, including himself. He didn't complain, didn't make excuses, just did the work, cleaned the floors, emptied the trash, learned the names of the civilian staff, started seeing them as people rather than obstacles or servants. And one morning, 4 weeks after the incident, he came to work early and found Evelyn already in the gym. She was sweeping the same mats where their confrontation had occurred. He didn't say anything, just picked up a mop and started cleaning alongside her, working in silence. No words necessary, just two people doing a job that needed doing. They worked like that for 20 minutes. Then Evelyn paused, leaning on her broom, and looked at him. "You're ready," she said simply. Reed understood. He nodded. "Thank you, Miss Harper." That afternoon, he pinned the golden trident back onto his uniform, but it felt different now, heavier, not with pride but with responsibility, with the understanding that this symbol was a promise, not a prize, a commitment to live up to the legacy of the people who came before, to earn the respect that couldn't be demanded, to lead by serving. Commander Brooks noticed the change. Master Chief Grant noticed. The other operators noticed. And without anyone making a formal announcement, Reed was welcomed back not just to duty, but to brotherhood. Because he had learned the lesson that some people never learn. That humility isn't weakness. That admitting error takes more courage than pretending perfection. That true strength comes from the willingness to be transformed by your mistakes. Years later, Reed would still be serving, would become a Master Chief himself, would train new generations of SEALs, and he would always tell them the story of the janitor with the tattoo, the woman who taught him that dignity isn't given, it's chosen, that respect isn't demanded, it's earned, that the most important battles aren't always fought with weapons. Sometimes they're fought with brooms and patience and the quiet refusal to be diminished by anyone's contempt. He would tell them about Evelyn Harper, about Sarah and Mackenzie, about the mission that never officially happened but changed everything nonetheless, about the women who swam into the dark so that others could land in the light. And he would remind them, as Evelyn had reminded him, that service is a covenant, not a contract, that duty persists long after the mission ends, that honor is measured not in medals or recognition, but in the daily choice to be someone worth following, someone worth trusting, someone who understands that the chain of command is held together not by orders and rank, but by mutual respect and shared sacrifice. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The sun was setting over the naval base. Another day ending, another shift complete. Evelyn Harper locked the supply closet, checked her cart one final time, and began the walk to her car. The base was quieter at this hour. Most personnel had gone home. The training facilities were dark. Only the security lights remained, casting long shadows across the parking lot. As she walked, her shadow stretched behind her, long and thin, a solitary figure moving through the fading light. To anyone watching, she was just a janitor, an older woman finishing her shift, unremarkable, forgettable. But shadows don't tell the whole story. They don't show the weight carried, the memories held, the promises kept. They don't reveal the scars invisible to the eye but etched deep in the soul. They don't speak of frozen harbors and lost friends and choices made in the dark that echo through decades. Evelyn reached her car, a modest sedan with a faded bumper sticker that read, "Korea Veteran." Most people probably assumed it belonged to her husband or father. They never looked close enough to see the truth. She paused before getting in, her hand resting on the door handle. For a moment she was back in that harbor, treading water, waiting, hopping, the cold seeping into her bones, the darkness absolute, the decision looming. Stay and risk everything. Go and complete the mission. She had chosen, and she had lived with that choice every day since, not with regret exactly, but with the profound understanding that honor sometimes requires sacrifice, that duty sometimes demands the impossible, that serving means being willing to carry burdens that no one else will ever fully understand. The tattoo on her neck tingled slightly, as it sometimes did when she remembered, a phantom sensation, a reminder, the coiled serpent and trident invisible beneath her collar but always present, always there. Sarah Mackenzie, the sister she had lost in the dark. "I'm still here," she whispered to the empty parking lot, to the ghosts that followed her, "still remembering, still carrying you forward." The words disappeared into the cooling evening air. No one heard them. No one needed to. They were a private ritual, a daily reaffirmation of the promise inked into her skin all those years ago. She got in her car and drove home, just another person leaving work at the end of another ordinary day. Tomorrow she would return, would sweep the same floors, would empty the same trash cans, would maintain the spaces where warriors trained, never demanding recognition, never expecting glory. Because that's what dignity looks like. Not the dramatic gesture, not the public acknowledgement, but the daily choice to serve with excellence regardless of whether anyone notices, to treat every task with respect, to honor the memory of those who can't be honored publicly by living a life worthy of their sacrifice. The strongest warriors don't always carry weapons. Sometimes they carry brooms and memories and the unshakable conviction that every job, no matter how humble, matters, that service has value beyond recognition. That character is defined not by rank or position, but by the unwavering commitment to do what's right even when no one is watching. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. In the quiet, in the dark, in the ordinary moments that add up to a life of extraordinary purpose. That's the lesson Evelyn Harper learned in the freezing waters of Onsen Harbor. That's the lesson she taught a young SEAL who thought strength was about dominance. That's the lesson she embodied every single day, sweeping floors with the same precision she once used to disarm minds, maintaining order with the same dedication she once brought to impossible missions. The world may not remember her name, history may not record her sacrifice, but the people who truly understand service know the truth. Heroes don't always wear medals. Sometimes they wear maintenance uniforms, and they change the world one clean floor at a time, carrying the weight of ghosts and glory with equal grace, proving that honor isn't about recognition. It's about being someone worth remembering, even if no one ever does.